Good morning, everyone. Lots going on in the world, and I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. Global News is reporting the Iran nuclear deal members say agreement will be preserved despite challenges from the U.S. Challenges? The U.S. tanked the deal, didn't they? Didn't just say, no, I don't think so. They tanked it, right? Here it is. Global News is reporting. I'm just going to scroll down. President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the so-called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action unilaterally in 2018, saying that it was a bad deal and needed to be renegotiated. The deal promises Iran economic incentives in exchange for curbs on its nuclear program, but with the reinstatement of American sanctions, the other nations have been struggling to provide Iran the assistance it seeks. Complicating the matter, the U.S. announced recently it was triggering a 30-day process to restore virtually all UN sanctions on Iran, invoking a, quote, snapback mechanism that is part of the JCPOA agreement. Washington's argument is that as an original participant, it still has that right, even though it left the deal. Other signatories to the JCPOA agreement have rejected that argument, setting the stage for a potential crisis in the Security Council later this month, while the U.S. claimed to have reimposed sanctions in most of the rest of the world, saying the Trump administration's action is illegal and ignoring it. I think that's speculative. I don't think that that's true. The whole reason, regardless of whether the rest of the world ignores Trump, etc., the fact that the law that Trump is following carries weight, we just have to look at Huawei, right? Huawei is in trouble for dealing with Iran against the U.S. sanctions, and the U.S. requested her detention in Canada for extradition to the United States for that reason, or part of that reason. And so, that has real world implications, whether you agree or disagree with Trump, right? Canada is, we're allies with the United States, and we have to follow through with that. Rule of law, as Justin Trudeau likes to say a lot. So, isn't that interesting, right? It's interesting. You can't just say, oh yeah, we're going to carry on with this Iran deal. Remember all that money the U.S. gave, and UN was the architect of this deal, right? Under Barack Obama, this was his foreign policy. Lots of money to do whatever you want. Okay, that makes sense. Here, back to this. Other signatories to the JCPOA agreement have rejected the argument, setting the stage, ignoring it, blah, blah, blah. After U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo traveled to the UN to invoke snapback on August 20th, Indonesia, UN Ambassador Diane Trinzian-Dijani, excuse me if I got that wrong, whose country held the rotating council presidency, said there was overwhelming opposition in the 15-member body to the U.S. position. He said it was unlikely there would be any action on Washington's demand. Interesting. I think that it's funny, even just the positioning, that holds consequences. That there are implications to that, right? There will be repercussions further down the line, and well within their right. And they're betting on Biden winning, but man, have you seen Biden? If you've watched anything recently from the past couple of days, you know that Biden's just not really there, right? So I don't think that they've got a chance. I think that they're just going to hope to delegitimize the vote on election day. I think that they're going to try and use the law and do their best to win it after the fact. We've seen this before, right? 2000 Bush v. Gore, right? So who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be tied up forever, or maybe Trump's got an ace up his sleeve. Who knows, right? But man, the whole thing is going to be interesting because it has broader implications. Who wins the U.S. presidency sets the tone on Russia, sets the tone on China, sets the tone on Iran, right? And that matters a lot, right? And people are saying that, saying that all of the rioting, et cetera, is Trump's fault. It's not Trump's fault. It's inaction by the local governments, the Democrat local governments. And they're saying that internationally, what Trump's doing is destabilizing things. But really, I think he's just realigning the power structures. And I think that a lot of people, citizens of the United States and broader the worldwide, agree with him, because he's not realigning back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, but he's reestablishing the American exceptionalism, the idea of, Americans can produce, Americans can be self-sufficient, Americans can manufacture, all of those things that were the stories of a building nation, right? The modernization of the United States from the 60s to the 2000s. And those stories were supposed to be, were told to us as good, and now they're being vilified because Trump wants to do it. I think he's got a lot of support. Okay, Rona Ambrose. That's a long-winded way, right? Like, but all of this matters. I couldn't imagine Biden taking control of all of this, right? Can you? And like that, the implications to the rest of the world, handing it to China, basically. And so here is Ryan Grieve, and he says, former interim Conservative Party leader Rona Ambrose is joining Toronto Dominion Bank full-time, expanding an advisory role she had with the bank, according to multiple sources familiar with the move. Isn't that interesting? So many government people. Didn't Scott Bryson go work for the Bank of Montreal? Rona Ambrose, former leader of the Conservative Party, working for Dominion Bank, TD. You know, it's something to note. Universities, banks, something to note. Okay, moving into the actual news. Justin Trudeau took a long time to discuss the decapitation and vandalization of the Sir John A. Macdonald statue in Montreal. That's notable because he is from Quebec, and John A. Macdonald is Canada's first prime minister. And you'd think the current prime minister would have something to say on that vandalization. And it took him a few days. And now, it took him a few days because he wanted to get the spin just right, just perfect. And I mentioned this yesterday, but I didn't mention the spin, so I'll mention it now. Barrett Wilson's saying, Trudeau blames extreme right for dividing Canadians after John A. Macdonald statue toppled. And here's the quote. This is the Post-Millennial, and the quote is down here, and I'll just read the rest of the article. You can check it. Link is in the description. Quote, we've seen following that people on either side of the spectrum trying to use these elements as a way of furthering debates, the Prime Minister said, only in French. I think we're seeing that particularly on the extreme right, that they're trying to start culture wars and divide Canadians on issues such as that. We have an awful lot to do in this country, said Trudeau, noting that mistakes made by previous generations should be recognized. Okay, and judged through the lens of the modern person, and it's only it's not the extreme far right that are burning down Portland and having riots and claiming Nazis and attacking people in the streets for no reason at all. It's not the extreme far right. That's the extreme left, actually. Those are the Antifa, behaving very much like the fascists they are. Interesting, right? Dan Alba says, PM Trudeau referenced that, quote, we have a lot of work to do a few times today during this morning's media announcement. Proroguing of Parliament shut down work that democratically elected MPs do on behalf of Canadians in Parliament. The PM needs to reconvene the House. I agree with that. NDP says documents prove Youth Minister Bardish Chagger played key role in WE controversy. National News Watch, and we'll just quickly look at this. I don't usually use this news source, but whatever. NDP says documents prove Youth Minister played key role in WE decision. Federal New Democrats are citing recently released documents as proof that Youth Minister Bardish Chagger was the key driver in the Liberal government's decision to have WE Charity administer a multi-million-dollar student volunteer program. NDP ethics critic Charlie Angus leveled the charge against Chagger Tuesday, alleging the documents released last month directly contradict the Liberals' assertion the public servants recommended we run the now defunct Canada Student Service Grant. The documents had been requested by the House of Commons Finance Committee as part of an investigation of the government's deal with we, which the Toronto-based youth organization backed out of in early July amid political controversy. We had logged ties to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his family, including paying close relatives to appear at WE events. Throughout this scandal, the Prime Minister and the Liberal government have affirmed again and again that it was the civil service that drove this agenda, Angus said during the news conference on Parliament Hill. But thanks to the government documents that have been revealed, we now know that is simply not true. Angus focused on the email that WE co-founder Craig Kielburger sent to Chagger on April 22nd, in which Kielburger thanked the minister for meeting with him 5 days earlier to discuss the idea of creating small business program for young people to promote entrepreneurship during the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, we appreciate your thoughts or your thoughtful offer to connect us with relevant members of your ministry, Kielburger added over the weekend. Our team has also been hard at work to adapt your suggestion on a second term focused on a summer service opportunity. That second stream was what became the grant program, Angus alleged, as he cited several email exchanges between the federal bureaucrats and WE in the days between Chagger's meeting with Kielburger and his follow-up email. If you look at the documents, it's clear that was the key moment that drove this agenda forward, Angus said. Prior to April 17th, you can see in the documents that this government was all over the map. There were many, many options on the table, but after April 17th, there's only one plan. It's the Kielburger plan. And basically at the end he says, we expect accountability from this government, and I expect the Prime Minister to show accountability, Angus said, but the focus right now is going to be what's in that throne speech. So the NDP, this is a little bit of rattling the saber. They're calling for Chagger to step down because she lied. And here's Charlie Angus making that point here. But ultimately, they're going to try and use the throne speech to get politically what they want. They're not going to hold this government accountable. The NDP are needed and the Bloc are needed, along with the Conservatives, to bring the government down. So if they like what they hear in the throne speech, one of those parties can maintain the government. Trudeau only needs to appeal to one of those parties, just one, and they've got another. I think it lasts until January before the next scandal takes them down, because we's easy to understand. People don't like it, but who are you going to vote for? I mean, is it going to be O'Toole at this point? Maybe. Here's Charlie Angus on why Chagger should step down. Here we go.
Minister Chagger has been given multiple opportunities to be truthful with the Canadian people. The document shows she played a key role. She has not told us that. I think Canadians would have a lot of misgivings about her maintaining a role such as she has if she can't be trusted to tell the truth about her role in this scandal. And it's not just Chagger who hasn't told the truth. I mean, Morneau's gone. Morneau's the only adult in the room, right? Like the only person with business acumen, the only person who's had a big enough, wide enough experience and wide enough credentials to run a government-sized economy, like fiscal program, like a state, right? Like Canada. And it's complicated to run Canada. Now we've got the finance minister who used to be a reporter, very smart woman, but I still wouldn't want a reporter running the country's finances, right? If like a different country, if Scandinavia or some other country, just name a country, if they made a former reporter, even a very intelligent former reporter, unless that former reporter also was a financial wizard, I would make fun of that country. I feel like we deserve to be made fun of, right? Hey, this is the finance minister and deputy prime minister. What's her experience? Oh, have you seen this picture with George Soros? There you go. That's her experience. That's it. Really. I mean, what other experience could she be claiming? Like, it's ridiculous. And credentialism, Evan Solomon? Come on. Credentialism. How dare you demand somebody be qualified for their position? How dare you? Greta Eyes. Go on. Okay, here's the Toronto Star demanding Barney's Chagger got to go under the bus for the Liberals, right? They're reporting Justin Trudeau's youth minister urged to resign for misleading Canadians during WE testimony. Okay, so if the NDP is demanding Barney's Chagger resign in addition to Morneau, Justin Trudeau, the guy who the buck stops with, he could live with that. He could live with that, right? See Jane Philpott, see Jody Wilson-Raybould, see Cesar Chivanas, and many others. If you're a woman in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, you're very important until you're not anymore, right? Just like in Hollywood. Okay, moving on. Once again, a weakened Liberal government offers the NDP an opening. Yes, and the NDP is going to use it to virtue signal really, really hard while accomplishing not holding the government accountable and not really doing their jobs because, the government is supposed to hold the people who are leading the government to account. And there are a lot of people who don't have confidence in this government. And if the NDP keep propping them up, I hope they pay a heavy price. Here's Holly Dillon, and she says, we won't call the app a flop yet. I do think we need to give this a bit of time, says Tam, Dr. Theresa Tam. And she's talking about the Health Canada tracking app that nobody's downloading because, no, it's over. It's over. We're getting into COVID, and I think this will be the end of the show. I think it's interesting. Graphs and other things. This is also interesting to note. The United States won't join global coronavirus vaccine efforts because it's led by the WHO. Yeah, I mean, that's notable. That used to be influential, right? See the first story for the reasons it's not anymore, because governments like to virtue signal how much they hate Donald Trump because it's good for the votes. So say their rigged polls. Really? Okay, here is Seamus O'Regan, and he says, this only ends with a vaccine, so Canada will have a vaccine. This only ends with a vaccine? There are a lot of people recovering, Mr. O'Regan. Here's some stats. Here's Dr. Eli David, and he said two charts that summarize everything. The first shows cases in Spain and France, a terrible second wave, worse than the first, but the second chart shows no mortality in sight, just cases. This is the best evidence that we're dealing with a case-demic, not a pandemic. And that's where I got case-demic from. Those aren't my words. Much more intelligent people than me. So there's the new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in France, right? You see the second wave starting, right? But it's the deaths aren't there, right? Can't see that. Hold on. Move me over. I think Twitter's just trolling me. And then this is the new deaths chart. New deaths attributed to COVID-19 in Spain and France. Okay? That's very interesting. Very interesting indeed, isn't it? Here's some more interesting data from Milhouse. I love Milhouse. I like that he was always in love with Lisa, and she was always kind of like, oh, Milhouse. Okay, Milhouse Van Houten says, fun with Canadian, Ontario, Quebec COVID-19 charts, filling a void in reporting. You can learn a lot from publicly available data presented to you in new ways and to be updated periodically. So this was August 30th. And so this is age. I'm just going to get me out of here for a minute so we can all see. Age distribution and deaths, right? If you look on the left-hand side of the chart, 0 to 19 is 1, 20 to 29 is 9. And I want to show you as well, I think here's the flu. Yeah. Here's the 2018 flu data on the right there. The deaths by age group in flu is 37 from the 0 to 19 group for flu in 2018. And yet in 2020 or 2018 average versus 2019 COVID deaths, that is much less deadly than the flu if you just compare that bracket. If you take the first two brackets and add them together, the first bracket for flu is more deadly in 2018. So that's very, very, very interesting, and that's borne out in this data here as well. Like that's obvious on this data here. And there's much more interesting data through these charts and people in ICU, right? Talking about how there's very little. What does he say here? There's little apparent relationship now between new reported COVID-19 cases and deaths or ICU administrations. So there you go. You can see that the red is the number of patients in ICU, and the blue is the number of cases. So there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of very interesting data that makes me think that these lockdowns are not the only answer. This doesn't end with the vaccine. And why isn't the government taking all of this data into account? I don't understand it. I do understand it. But any thinking person would be able to look at this objectively and say, hey, local public health people, hey, everybody, why are we behaving as if this thing were any more deadly than the 2018 flu season? Like, why? And it's not like we've got a flu season to add on top of this either. And even if we did, 16,000 deaths, if we doubled everything, maybe, you might have this other thing that's just like the flu, but this thing looks to be just kind of melting in with the flu like a respiratory virus. I've been long asking, what are the criteria to repeal mandatory masks? What does it take to repeal mandatory masks? I was happy that this was addressed by the health, by the people in the public health. It was not really addressed at all. They just kind of said, yeah, we hear you, we're not going to tell you. Here's Adam Donaldson. He's an independent Guelph reporter, and he says, Dr. Tenenbaum, the more masks, the better. The projection for everyone, when will mandate be lifted? Dr. Tannenbaum says it's a strong recommendation, but the commercial mandate will be reviewed as the science evolves. I would love to know, what science specifically? What are you asking? What are we looking for? What criteria? And they never go back to it. I actually asked for a follow-up, and Mr. Donaldson was less than willing to talk to me about it, which I thought was weird. Anyway, whatever. Super professional. Very, very professional. Okay, moving on. Not moving on. This is in the same vein. I came across this, I guess, August 29th or 30th. I put it in my little cache of things that I'm going to show you. And this is a collection of people with their Twitter handles. So I haven't gone through all of these and verified, but this is people saying, I got a staph infection on my nose from wearing a mask, or people who say they're ICU patient or ICU nurses saying that, here's one. No, not that one. I'm an RN, and this is fact. We've treated more staph infections on the face than I've ever seen before in the past 2 months. New development this week was a thrush in mouth and nose. And so, the public health is, here's another one. Just treated 2 children with impetigo staph infection of the skin on the lower half of the face. The cause was from wearing a mask. Parents, children should not wear masks. Yes, because having a bacteria-laden piece of fabric over your face all day is not helpful. It hurts you. And here's just a whole bunch of other anecdotal, personal stories that if you want to share them, you can share them. If you don't want to share them, that's fine. The Ontario Liberal Party, is launching a back-to-school whistleblowing website for parents, students, educators, custodians, bus drivers, and other school staff to highlight issues with the reopening. This is not going to backfire. Watch this backfire in 3, 2, 1, right? Like, this is just a terrible, terrible idea. Tell us your story of how somebody wronged you under the new COVID rules. We will bring this, we will normalize this as soon as possible, right? So exemptions exist, by the way, for masks. I was able to access an exemption under a very strictly regulated, everybody said masks are mandatory, blah, 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 blah. I contacted the principal. I contacted the people I needed to contact. I had to fill out a Google form, and they're exempt from masks. So, ta-da. It is possible at this point in time. We'll see how things go. I'll be keeping a close eye, have no doubt. Okay, I want to shine light on this, and then there's one more quick study, the COVID backlog. Okay, I'm going to keep it with COVID, and then I'll move on. Well, it's school board related. Okay, COVID backlog is going to take 84 weeks. The criticism is, when do those 84 weeks start? We haven't got back to normal yet. It's fiction that we have an idea of how long the backlog is going to take. We should be getting back to normal ASAP. See all the charts I referenced earlier in the show. Okay, last story for today, because I believe this deserves light to be shined on this. This is happening in our country, and this kind of stuff is concerning. And I say that a lot, but it is. Okay, this is just an ordinary Canadian dad who objected to his underage daughter, 14-year-old female at the time, being injected with testosterone without his consent, and now he faces a prison sentence. Shame on all of us in this country. Please retweet from a lawyer of BC father who tomorrow will go to court and say he's willing to be imprisoned to shed light on what is going on in our schools and gender clinics in order to protect children. Please share. And yes, I'm going to share because this is important. Father of a trans child facing prison over civil disobedience. Father denied rights to protect trans-identified teen risks prison for warning parents of rapid onset gender dysphoria in young girls. In the Supreme and Appeals Court of British Columbia, he fought the law and experimenting healthcare professionals who denied him guardianship rights to stop injecting puberty blockers and testosterone in his 14-year-old child. He is now charged in his family matter by provincial court counsel with 3 counts of criminal contempt of court. The allegation is he breached court orders banning publication of important facts. He regards the orders as breaching his charter guaranteed freedom of speech to warn all parents of young girls, I suppose that's supposed to say. Mainstream media has been successfully cowed and scared off examining the science and facts of gender dysphoria by militantly aggressive and threatening social justice activists. In this circumstance, the father sees himself as unequivocally the one person who can draw the public attention to the spreading craze of rapid onset gender dysphoria in girls. The father will tell the court he knowingly breached the orders in full knowledge and expectation of punishment, including imprisonment. He believes parents of young girls need to be warned of the known risks to the physical and emotional harm of the school's SOGI programs, doctors at the gender clinic at Children's Hospitals Vancouver, and social justice activists. It is believed this is the first time criminal contempt, as opposed to the more common civil contempt, has been brought against a parent in any family court in Canada. The first appearance on the criminal contempt applications will be heard at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, September 2nd, as the law courts in Vancouver. The style of the cause in the case is ABVCD and EF court file number. Ask sheriff officer for direction. The courtroom will be open to the public. So this is a Facebook post. Obviously, this is a touchy subject. I think that it bears discussion. I think that it's very interesting that one parent can start this process and then remove another parent of guardianship rights and then imprison that parent for even speaking about it. That's uncomfortable, right? That's happening in Canada, and I don't know how to fight this stuff. I don't know how you effectively mount a battle against this stuff. This guy, I can guarantee you, feels alone, and that nobody listens and nobody cares. And basically, he's saying, like, look what they did. You think that you have guardianship of your child. You think you have the right to raise your child as you see fit, and to not experiment with them, or at least not let other people experiment with them. And well, in 2020 in Canada, I don't know. I don't know if that's true, right? So it's a concerning time. And How do you protect your children in this world, right? How do you protect them when they won't tell you how long the mask mandate will last, or what criteria for repealing it? How long before staph infections or other infections get too bad, and will they be discussed, right? And how about snitch lines? Did you expect that one with back to school? Welcome back to school. Here's your auditory recording device. Put it in your backpack and don't tell your parents about it. That's where we're at, because, hey, they can do it. But at the same time, I mean, you carry around your auditory recording spying device, right? And your tracking device and all sorts of other things, and you're addicted to it too. Don't forget to go to Facebook. Yeah, that's where we're at. 2020. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. It's raining. It just started raining. These things happen. Have a wonderful day.